Hello everyone, welcome to Reading Marathon, and today we're doing day one, passage one. It is called The History of Picnic. So the way I do it throughout the videos, you'll see, so I try to complete however many types of questions I have, because in a typical passage you have 2 to 3 types of questions, but sometimes you might have 4 types of questions in a passage, but usually in passage one you have 2 types of questions, in passage two or three, and in passage three usually 3 types of questions. So I read the title, and the title has to give me an idea what I'm reading about, but I always keep in mind the first passage is descriptive, it's factual, and there's no opinion, there's no argumentation, and it's usually related to history, and I can say it's the case today as well, the history of the picnic. So I know what picnic is, and we're going to look at the history of it. And then it's very important. You need to first of all read the title. You need to get an idea what the text is going to be about. With that in mind, you need to then go to the questions. Therefore, if the title, because sometimes what the writers of this test do, they do a wordplay with the title. So sometimes the title might not give you enough idea of what the text is going to be about. In that case, you need to read the first sentence, or that suffices. Usually, reading the first sentence allows you to understand what the text is going to be about. You have to keep in mind these texts are not written for IELTS to make questions. These were published in whatever publication, and IELTS after some time found this passage and they said, okay, we're going to use this, and they wrote to whatever publication it was published and they asked for permission. Can we use your text in our exam? And added some parts of it so that we create questions. And then with their permission granted, they created questions. You have to keep in mind the text is always important and the questions are secondary. All right? So you always need to pay attention to the structure of how the text is being developed, how it's evolving. And then you look at types of questions. Each type of question has got, it's something about it that you need to know. For example, true, false, not given questions, you need to know that they're always in order. And false means if I can correct the statement with the statement, if I can correct the statement with the information given in the text. And those kinds of things you need to know about each type of question. If you do not know certain types of questions, you need to watch my reading question types video course that I have on my YouTube channel. So with that said, why don't we start looking at the first picnics were held in parks. Okay, so you start realizing which question is focusing on what as you do more practice. I think the key word here is whether they were held in parks or elsewhere. People who attended early French picnics were expected to bring food or help with the expense. Expense means cost, right? The hosts of early French picnics often asked their guests to play music. The picnic was brought to England by aristocrats escaping the French Revolution. What I'm doing in each question, I'm trying to find a word that I cannot miss. Like for example, here in question number 4, it's the word French Revolution. Many complaints were received about the noise at the first English picnics. People who wanted to join picnic society had to have the approval of existing members. And the picnics held by the picnic society were extravagant events, meaning luxurious events. A lot of money and resources were wasted. Picnics took place in theaters. All right, one word only. So in England, that suffice. In 1800s, I'm not going to read every question in the same way I did this because I have what are they called? They had little subheadings, So these I'm going to be reading them only in England, in the US, and return to France. These more than enough. All right, with that in mind, I go now to the text. Picnics became popular in France in the 18th century. All right, I'm going to look at question number 9 when they talk about England in the 1800s, but I'm going to stay focused on the first type of question because in reading passage 1, usually everything is in order. Usually, I'm not saying all the time, but 90% of the time, everything is in order. But in passage 2 and 3, that's normally not the case. Picnics became popular in France in the 18th century, a favorite pastime of the upper classes. It was famous with upper classes, meaning rich people. They were initially purely indoor affairs. All right, just a second. They were indoor affairs held at home in hired rooms. So the first answer is going to be false, right? because they were not held in parks, they were held at home and in hired rooms. Inside, it was assumed that invited guests would contribute, they would contribute. It was assumed that synonym for expected. They would either bring a dish, which is synonym for bring food, or pay a share of overall cost of, These picnics were often, that's two, right? Two is going to be true. Yes, that's what they were expected to do. These picnics were often marked by, like characterized by conversation, wit. Wit is like, being able to speak well and, have humor as such, and were associated with intellectual refinement, intellectual improvement. All right, at larger gatherings, there was also music. Okay, there is a question about 3 in music, right? With the result that picnic came to mean the same as a ball or party. All right, it came to mean the same thing as ball or party. But do we know if the hosts offer their guests to play music? There's no such thing about the hosts, requiring or wanting them. Picnics were often nothing if not adaptable, meaning they were really adaptable. When the first restaurants appeared, picnickers quickly began going to them and having picnics there. When restaurants came, picnickers went to restaurants. All right. If I end up finding 4, then the answer for 3, this music part, is going to make it not given because we don't know what the host asked. The French Revolution, 1789, changed everything, with many wealthy aristocrats fleeing abroad. Fleeing means, escaping to an overseas country. Some went to Austria, others to Prussia, even America, but the majority chose to go to England, settling mainly in London. Some were now in need of money. All right, so number 4, it's going to be the hosts of, no, that's not given. That's definitely not given because we don't now know. But why the picnic was brought to England by aristocrats, escaping the French? Yes, because they were either going to all of these countries, but most of them ended up in England, and as a result, they introduced the picnic to England, right? Though that's going to be, yes, indeed, that's what aristocrats did, because many wealthy aristocrats were fleeing. This led to several improvement developments. The first and shortest lived was the picnic became decidedly less refined and noisier. It has become noisier. Okay, that's question number 5. This was thanks to a group of around 200 wealthy and young people who loved French culture and friends, and in late 1801 they founded Picnic Society. Okay, so they came up with a picnic society held in hired rooms in Tottenham Street in London. The society's gatherings were intended to impress. Okay, they were intended to impress. Do we know how many complaints were received? So the answer for 5 is going to be not given. We know they were noisier, but do we know whether many or few complaints? So therefore the answer for 5 is going to be not given. Now, what about every member was required to bring a costly dish and something to drink? All right, so question number, so we have requirements. Requirement is you need to bring a dish and you need to bring a drink. They have to be expensive. But do we know if they have to have approval of the existing members? No, there's no contradiction. So that cannot be contradiction. So that makes question number 6 not given too, all right? I'm sorry for my NG. As the Times newspaper reported, each member tried to outdo the others in terms of luxury and expense. That makes the question number 7 true, because they are trying to outdo each other in terms of luxury and expense, which means extravagant. So the answer for question number 7 is going to be true. The productions were quite okay. After dinner, the principal main entertainment was play. So the main entertainment was a play. So they put on a performance, and the productions were admittedly quite basic. The stage was small, crudely built, simply built, unlike in a theater, which means they were not in theater. And the actors were never professionals. So that means the answer for 8 is going to be false. So I'm done with this first set of questions. As you see, like I said, it's normally the case that everything follows each other, right? But that's not the case with other, passages, as we see more and more. Another development in England in the 1800s was more profound. The picnics were adopted by the emerging middle class. Okay, in the 1800s, picnics began to be, if there was held by, then I would say middle class, but no. And they were moved outside. Okay, that makes question number 9, not 8, 9, outside. All right, so I'm going to write outside. Oh, like what's happening? Just a second. Okay, no, come on. Okay, what's happening? Outside. You get the idea. All right, so the answer is outside. And when what caused this change is unclear, but the most likely explanation is that the English simply applied fashionable French word to pre-existing practice. So they already had this practice, but they just applied new word picnic without being aware of what it meant. One of the results was that music ceased to be provided at picnics. Cease means to stop. So picnics no longer usually included for entertainment. What wasn't included? Music wasn't included. So the answer for question number 10 is going to be music was no longer provided. Which became just rather plain, simple, open-air meals to which people were invited by a host. Another was that it became more genteel, hopefully, and thanks to the idealization of countryside, more innocent. So what happened in England, picnic became more genteel, and it became more innocent. All right, in the decades which followed, this form of picnic found its way to the United States. Now it's in the United States. Picnics were a favorite activity for people living in somewhere. As was only to be expected, it remained refined activity, most popular, which is synonym for favorite activity, with middle class in cities. So the answer for 11 is going to be cities. All right, city. All right, but unlike in England, its setting was associated more with a flight from civilization than with childlike simplicity. It was associated with flight from civilization. All right, though it's still tinged with innocence, it's still innocent. Paintings of picnics by well-known American artists contain fewer gently rolling fields. If you look at England paintings, you have more rolling fields, but in America there are fewer of them. Instead they had trees, instead they had mountains. So you remember in England painting was more innocent, but in America it was like more, a symbol of like civilization. So American paintings of, okay, just a second. I'm gonna circle this. American paintings of picnics were different from those. Well, how they were different? Well, because they had fewer rolling fields and more trees and mountains. Therefore, they were different. All right, now I'm going to look at question number, return to France. Picnics in the open air were less well received elsewhere, however, though restoration of French monarchy was accompanied by the returning of picnicking to France. Their indoor version still predominated. Indoor picnics still preferred, especially among the aristocracy. So that's going to make the question number 13, aristocracy. Aristocracy. All right, but the legacy of revolutionary equality in France also opened up the picnic to others lower down the social scale, meaning like poor people too. By the mid-19th century, even members of the working class in France were starting to adopt the practice. So working class is also doing picnic. When outdoor picnics eventually did begin to gain ground, they were regarded with considered suspicion, perhaps because of a growing reaction in France against the romantic idolization of nature, and they were not seen as innocent and wholesome as they were in England. And in France, it wasn't seen as innocent and wholesome. All right. In general, not until the 20th century did the outdoor picnic prevail. Prevail means like be victorious over the indoor kind. Particularly in England, the development of different forms of transport and acceleration of social change made the countryside accessible to far greater proportion of the population. So new kinds of what made the countryside became more common. That's new kinds of development of different. That's new kind of transport. So the answer for 14 is going to be transport. All right, something designed especially for use by picnickers were widely sold. Before long, the popularity of picnic had grown so much that specialist picnic baskets, picnic specialist means that's designed especially. Picnic baskets were being produced for the mass market. That means widely sold. So the answer is going to be baskets. And finally, we have there is now greater in the food that's available. That's used for picnics. Over the last 100 years, picnics have undergone still further changes. They've seen more changes, largely as a result of the international availability of huge variety of food to be transported over long distances. That's simply because of variety of wood, huge variety synonym for there's now greater, so the answer is going to be variety. All right, variety. All right, that concludes passage one with your walkthrough. So what you need to do, you need to look at the word list we have and learn all the new words and learn all the words that might not be in the word list, that might be new for you. And you read the articles that are sent by us. And also, it's important that you read an article that interests you, because the article I've chosen might not be to your liking, so it might be different to what you normally read. So reading has to happen in a fun way, all right?